All right there, everyone. The role of disinformation and defamation in the pursuit of leftist goals. That's what we'll be talking about on today's video. Before we do, I just want to remind you that you can get my latest book, The New Nationalism, How the Populist Right is Defeating Globalism and Awakening a New Political Order, free for a limited time as an ebook download on the link below. If you want a nice balance of the theoretical and evidential basis for the new nationalism rising all around us, then this book is for you. It's my gift to you, absolutely free for a limited time at the link below. All right, so I don't know how many of you have heard about the article published in USA Today a couple of days back that said that Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh should stay away from coaching girls basketball because of the numerous sexual assault allegations levied against him by, in this case, at least 3 accusers. The piece was presented as a news story rather than as an opinion piece that it actually was. A pretty pathetic and vile opinion piece at that. And what the article did is it picked up on Kavanaugh's complaint during his hearing on Thursday that more than anything else, he loved coaching girls basketball. But now he may not be able to do that ever again because of these completely and totally baseless allegations of sexual assault. And so this USA Today piece basically went on to insinuate, if you can believe it, that these allegations make Kavanaugh a potential pedophile, and that, yes, he should consider not being alone with young girls anymore. I mean, this stuff is just beyond contempt. Charles Cook in National Review, he said it best. The piece was irresponsible. It was inflammatory, foolhardy, opprobrious, and thoughtless, and it served absolutely no purpose whatsoever than to further defame and slander someone's name who has not been proven guilty of any crime at all. Fortunately, very fortunately, another 7,000 people on social media reacted the same way, calling this piece nothing short of vile filth, simply just a vile attempt to defame and malign and slander a man who's generally considered beyond approach. Now, unfortunately, as I'm sure you know, USA Today is not alone in this deliberate attempt to smear and ruin the reputation of one of the finest judges in the nation. I was listening to a podcast that I will leave unnamed. It's an ultra-liberal podcast that makes even otherwise avowed liberals rather uncomfortable. And these guys were repeating precisely this kind of nonsense, that Kavanaugh has a reputation of getting too close with young girls, that he's been around the party circuit more than once, involving drugging women and raping them. Again, just the most vile and horrid stuff imaginable in terms of accusations. And in view of all this, I thought it'd be good for us to visit the whole role of lies, deception, disinformation, and defamation in the agenda of the modern left. Because I think by being very clear why it is that lies and defamation are an intrinsic part of the strategies of the modern left, I think we could be cognizant of how to effectively counter and neutralize these deliberate deceptions. Now, I'm not sure how many of you know of the concept that's come to be known as newspeak. Newspeak is a term that was introduced to us by George Orwell in his terrifying classic 1984. But it's a very important concept to make sure we get if we want to understand the cultural Marxism of the new left that has arisen over the course of the last several decades. And for me, the best assessment of Newsweek that I've come across is from the British conservative philosopher and scholar Roger Scruton in his book on the new leftists called Fools, Frauds, and Firebrands. I'll provide a link below for you if you'd like to get a copy. Fools, Frauds, and Firebrands. It's a great book that exposes the history and development of cultural Marxist leftists and their deliberate use of this thing called newspeak. Newspeak involves the importance of capturing language for the success of this new social movement. And if you think about it, that would seem innocent enough. Any new discipline that you learn, like law or economics or philosophy, medicine, they're all going to involve their own language, right? Their own terms and concepts and the like. But in the case of the new left, in the case of cultural Marxism, it's not simply a case of learning a new conceptual language. Marxism is about an entirely new global society than anything that came before it. Marxism is all about throwing off the classical historic notion that the world is filled with divine meaning and purpose, and that we're all obligated to conform our lives into a harmonious relationship with that divine meaning and purpose. And of course, religion, culture, custom, tradition, and language are all means by which we realize that divine obligation, find meaning and purpose for our lives. That whole notion of the world is completely disregarded by the Marxists on behalf of a world that has no inherent meaning or purpose at all. The Marxist world, by definition, is made up solely of biology, chemistry, and physics, and thus all cultures are merely arbitrary meaning systems that are splattered or imposed on otherwise meaningless natural processes. And the key for the cultural Marxists is who gets to impose such meaning and purpose upon otherwise meaningless and purposeless natural processes. Who gets that prerogative? It's the ones in any culture that get to impose meaning and purpose on meaningless processes are the ones who are in power. The rules, understandings of a goal and goals of a culture are defined by those who have the power to impose those standards on everyone else. So all cultures are therefore comprised of power discrepancies, where a dominant population, generally designated today as white, that dominant population disenfranchises and discriminates against minority populations. And this is forever the permanent state of human society, unless liberals come to power through a massive worldwide revolution that forever alters the course of human history. And this is why, as Scruton notes, this is why everything, literally everything from a leftist perspective, is recast as a struggle or a fight or a war, even peace. The liberal can't even talk about peace without talking about a fight for peace or struggle for peace. And so this is where Newspeak comes in. Newspeak, first and foremost, is the redefinition of language to designate which side a person is on. Are you on the side of the revolution or are you against it? In other words, labels from the very beginning have been used by Marxists to defame and discredit any and all people who are outside of the Marxist movement in order to marginalize them as a potential threat to the success of that movement, the revolution. And the Marxist marginalizes these threats by maligning and impugning them. Marxists marginalized by maligning and impugning, which means that the Marxists found out very early on that you can change reality by changing words. Write that down. You can change reality by changing words. And the key here is that the words are enough. The Marxist doesn't need an argument or logic or evidence or anything like that. The words are enough. The words are enough because the words, by definition, convey who's on the right side and who's on the wrong side of this societal revolution. If you are a misogynist, racist, homophobe, whatever, that's all that needs to be heard. You don't need evidence. You don't need logic. You don't need argument. You only need the accusation from the one who was part of the revolution. You only need the accusation from the one who is part of the revolution, because being on the right side of the revolution is the only evidence that Marxists need. Got to get that. And you demonstrate that evidence by your use of language in accordance with Marxist norms. That, in a nutshell, is Newspeak. It's the redefinition of language in the service of this totalizing struggle to wrench the totality of reality away from traditional, conservative, and religious norms in the service of a totalizing Marxist revolution. And dare I say it, this is why conservatives can look so pathetically flat-footed when dealing with these nutty liberals who are demanding the castigation of Brett Kavanaugh. You see, historically, words sought to convey reality or correspond to reality, right? The meaning of words reflected the meaning of the world. And so again, as Roger Scruton has noted, we dialogue. We speak to each other from the need to compromise, to reach agreements, and to establish peaceful and harmonious coordination with those who don't necessarily see the world the same way we do. This is how a conservative thinks about language. That is emphatically not how a Marxist thinks about language. A Marxist sees language as spoken either by a victim or the victimizer. either by one who has power to define the words or by one who has been disenfranchised from such a privilege and speaks in submission to those who dominate. Marxists therefore insist upon a Marxist system in order for speaking even to occur at all. In order for us to even have a conversation, social justice norms are required to decree what is and what is not allowed to even be said. This is why they're always yelling at us, and of course, this is political correctness. Now, the good news in all of this is that the primary institutions by which newspeak is communicated and making its way into our cultures, those institutions are going through a much needed credibility crisis right now, particularly here in the United States, but also in nations like Russia, Poland, Hungary, a number of other places. First and foremost, trust in the corporatist globalist media is at an all-time low. I'm sure many of you heard that CNN's ratings are down by an astonishing 40% over the last quarter. The so-called mainstream media is losing out when it comes to its objective credibility. And with the rise of the internet and cable, that's happening even in places like Britain, where it seems that every single media outlet is dedicated to newspeak. So this is a good thing in that alternative media is challenging the newspeak monopoly of the corporatist globalist media. This is true as well, by the way, for the liberal leftists who host the late night television shows such as Colbert and Kimmel, who combined are not even bringing in half the audience that Johnny Carson or Jay Leno were able to attract. So people are turning them off too. The university as well is becoming largely discredited when it comes to its politically correct culture. We're seeing, again, here in these states, we're seeing enrollment down about 10% across the board at most universities. Whereas when it comes to conservative Christian colleges and universities, enrollment is generally going up. So the universities are going through their own credibility crisis with a conservative corrective there. And of course, our politics is becoming a serious place of contestation in terms of newspeak, with the election of Donald Trump and nationalist populists throughout Europe and indeed the world who want nothing whatsoever to do with this Marxist redefinition of language. So all of that said, we need to make sure that we're ready for newspeak. We need to make sure that we're ready to call out the hysteria and defamation and derision that will come our way and call it out as the baseless political weaponry that it's attempting to be. The more people who recognize what they're doing and why they're doing it, the more they'll realize that this newspeak is there simply to manipulate and exploit them. It's there for no other reason than for liberals to force their own political agenda down our throats. They lie and intimidate others so that we'll be intimidated. And the more of us who recognize that, the more vile their lies will appear and the more emboldened we'll be to push back their cultural Marxist revolution into the dark abyss from which it came. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Click on our Patreon link below and become a monthly supporter of this channel and help us to continue to analyze current events in light of conservative trends so that you can personally and professionally flourish.